Hey guys, tonight we're traveling somewhere so cold that your eyelashes freeze into tiny icicles within seconds of stepping outside, where the air itself seems to crystallize around you in shimmering clouds, and where the locals have a saying, if you can still feel your face, it's not cold yet. We're headed to Yakutia, officially the Sakha Republic, a region in eastern Siberia that holds the record for the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. We're talking about temperatures that routinely plunge to minus 60 degrees Celsius, minus 65 degrees Celsius, and in the village of Oymyakon, a bone-chilling minus 71.2 degrees Celsius was recorded in 1924. That's colder than the average surface temperature of Mars. And yet people live here, raise families here, laugh and work, and somehow thrive in conditions that would turn you into a popsicle faster than you can say, I should have stayed in bed. Now, before we dive into the frost, here's a little reality check. If you stepped outside in Yakutia right now, underdressed and unprepared, you probably wouldn't survive more than 10 or 15 minutes. Your body would begin shutting down non-essential systems almost immediately, your extremities would freeze solid, and hypothermia would creep in like an unwelcome houseguest who never leaves. But the people of Yakutia? They've been doing this for thousands of years, and they've developed some truly wild techniques to stay alive, including one you'll learn about tonight that sounds absolutely bizarre until you're standing in minus 70 degrees Celsius with blood streaming from your nose and realize it's either genius or death. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments. Are you in sunny California at 9 p.m.? Or maybe it's 3 a.m. in London and you can't sleep? Let me know. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the small propeller plane onto the tarmac in Yakutsk, the capital of the Sakha Republic, and the cold hits you like a physical wall. It's not the kind of cold you've experienced before, not the biting wind of a Chicago winter or the damp chill of a London autumn. This is different. This cold is immediate and totalizing, as if the air itself has teeth. Your first breath sears your lungs, and you instinctively gasp, which only makes it worse. The moisture in your nostrils freezes instantly, creating a bizarre crackling sensation. And when you exhale, your breath doesn't just fog. It crystallizes into a cloud of tiny ice particles that locals call the whisper of the stars. It's beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The airport worker who greets you is bundled in layers you can barely count. A thick fur hat with ear flaps, a coat that looks like it could survive a nuclear winter, boots that add 4 inches to his height, and mittens so massive they resemble bare paws. He glances at your jacket, a perfectly adequate winter coat by any normal standard, and shakes his head with something between pity and amusement. You'll need better, he says in accented English, his words muffled by the scarf wrapped around his face. He's not being rude, he's stating a fact. In Yakutia, your clothing isn't fashion, it's survival equipment, and right now you're wearing the equivalent of a swimsuit to a blizzard. The thermometer outside the terminal reads minus 52 degrees Celsius. It's early January, which means you've arrived during one of the coldest months, though locals will tell you that February can be even worse. The sun hangs low on the horizon, barely clearing the tops of the apartment buildings before beginning its descent again. You're not quite at polar night latitude here in Yakutsk, that's further north, but winter days are still brutally short, with only about 4 hours of weak, watery sunlight that does almost nothing to warm the landscape. The rest is darkness, and in that darkness, the cold deepens like a living thing. Your guide, a woman named Sarjalana, meets you outside. She's in her 50s, with a face weathered by decades of extreme cold but eyes that sparkle with humor. First time in real winter? She asks, and you nod, still trying to catch your breath without freezing your lungs. She laughs. A warm, genuine sound that seems impossible in this environment. Don't worry, your body will learn or you'll die. Probably learn. She's joking, but only sort of. Historians still argue whether the original Sakha people who migrated here in the 13th and 14th centuries from the warmer Lake Baikal region did so voluntarily or were driven by conflict. But either way, they arrived in one of the most hostile environments on the planet and somehow made it work. That's either impressive adaptability or spectacular stubbornness, and you're betting on both. Sarjalana walks you toward a waiting van, and you notice something odd. She's not rushing. In fact, no one is rushing. The few people outside move with deliberate, measured steps, as if they're conserving energy or performing a slow-motion dance. Fast movements make you sweat, Sarjalana explains, noticing your confusion. Sweat freezes. Frozen sweat against your skin. She makes a slicing gesture across her throat. Not immediately fatal, but very bad. Everything here we do slowly, carefully. Speed kills. It's a strange inversion of the modern world, where everything is hurry, rush, faster. Now, here, haste doesn't just make waste, it makes corpses. The van's engine is running, and you learn why immediately. If you turn off a vehicle in this temperature, it might not start again. The oil thickens to near-solid sludge, batteries lose most of their charge, and diesel fuel turns to gel. Some people keep their cars running 24/7 from November through March, feeding them fuel like living things that need constant sustenance. Others have special heated garages, but those are luxuries most can't afford. The van's interior is blessedly warm, almost tropical, and you realize you're already sweating under your inadequate jacket. Sarjalana notices and shakes her head again. Take it off. Sweat now, freeze later. As you drive through Yakutsk, you notice the city looks like it's built on toothpicks. Every building, apartment blocks, shops, schools, sits elevated on thick concrete or wooden stilts, anywhere from 1 to 3 meters off the ground. The space underneath is open to the wind, and you can see straight through. Permafrost, Sarjalana says, following your gaze. Ground is frozen solid, sometimes hundreds of meters deep. But buildings are warm inside, yes? Heat would melt the permafrost underneath. And then, she makes a toppling motion with her hand. Building sinks, cracks, falls. So we build up, let the cold air flow underneath, keep everything frozen. It's engineering born of necessity, and it gives the entire city a strange, stilted appearance, as if it's tiptoeing across the landscape, afraid to commit its full weight. You pass a group of schoolchildren waiting at a bus stop, and you're struck by two things. First, they're outside in minus 52 degrees Celsius waiting for transportation like it's a mild autumn day. And second, they're absolutely covered in frost. Their eyelashes are white. Their scarves are crusted with ice from their breath. And the fur trim on their hoods looks like it's been dipped in powdered sugar. But they're laughing, shoving each other playfully, acting like kids anywhere. School is only canceled below minus 55 degrees Celsius, Sarjalana mentions casually. Otherwise, children go. Makes them strong. You wonder what the teachers' union would say about this back home and decide it's probably best not to find out. At a red light, you see a man standing on the corner, and you notice blood on his face. A nosebleed crimson against his pale skin. But instead of tilting his head back or reaching for a tissue, he does something that makes you do a double take. He scoops up a handful of clean snow from a nearby pile and holds it in his mouth. Not against his nose, not pressed to his face. In his mouth. You turn to Sarjalana, questions written all over your expression. She nods, unsurprised. Old technique. The snow melts slowly in the mouth, and the cold constricts blood vessels in the face and head through the palate. Stops nosebleeds faster than anything else in this temperature. Trying to use cloth or tissue. Freezes immediately, sticks to the skin, tears when you pull it away. Blood itself freezes on contact with air. Snow in the mouth works every time. It sounds like folklore, like something someone's grandmother swore by but has no scientific basis. Except it does. The roof of your mouth is rich with blood vessels that are part of the internal carotid system, and localized cooling there can indeed cause vasoconstriction in the nasal passages. It's the same principle behind putting an ice pack on the back of your neck for a nosebleed, except adapted for an environment where ice is everywhere and medical supplies might be kilometers away. The man finishes, spits out the pink-tinged slush, and walks on, unbothered. Just another Tuesday in Yakutia. Nosebleeds are common here. Sarjalana continues as the light changes. The air is so dry, cold air cannot hold moisture, so nasal passages crack, bleed. Some people, their nose bleeds every day in deep winter. You learn to live with it, or you learn the snow trick, or both. She pauses, then adds with a grin. Also works for minor toothaches. Cold numbs everything. We are very practical people. The van pulls up to a small house on the outskirts of the city, and Sarjalana announces this is where you'll be staying with a local family to get the authentic experience. The house sits on stilts like everything else, with smoke rising from a chimney and warm light glowing behind quadruple-paned windows. Tonight you rest, she says. Tomorrow we start learning how to not die. Is a good plan, yes? You nod, because really, what else can you do? You're here now, in a place where the cold is so extreme it changes the rules of existence, where ancient adaptation meets modern stubbornness, and where holding snow in your mouth to stop a nosebleed isn't weird. It's wisdom. You step out of the van, and the cold swallows you whole once more. Above, the stars are so bright and numerous they look fake, like someone spilled glitter across black velvet. The Milky Way stretches overhead in a luminous band, and you understand why the locals call that frost breath the whisper of the stars. In this clarity, this brutal, crystalline cold, the universe feels close enough to touch. Your nose starts to tingle, then itch, and you wonder if you're about to experience your first Yakutian nosebleed. But Sarjalana is already walking toward the house, and you follow, each breath a small act of courage, each step a tiny victory against a cold that has shaped this place and its people into something extraordinary. Welcome to Yakutia. Try not to freeze. Your first night in the Yakutian house is a study in extremes. Inside, it's almost tropically warm. The wood stove in the corner radiates heat like a small sun, and you find yourself stripping down to a single layer within minutes. Outside, the thermometer has dropped to minus 58 degrees Celsius, and you can hear the occasional crack and groan of contracting metal and wood as the cold tightens its grip on everything. Your host family, Mikhail, his wife Adalina, and their 2 teenagers, move around the space with practiced efficiency, and you notice things about them that seem subtly different from people you'd meet anywhere else. Mikhail is built like a barrel, thick and solid, with a broad chest and relatively short limbs. It's not obesity, it's structure. Adalina is similar, compact, sturdy, with a body composition that seems designed to conserve heat. Their son, Dmitri, 17 and already working on the family's small cattle operation, has the same build. Even their daughter, Nurgen, 15 and obsessed with K-pop in defiance of the ice age outside, has a stockiness that would be called big-boned elsewhere but here reads as evolutionary wisdom. You're looking at bodies that have been shaped by thousands of years of the most extreme cold on Earth, and the adaptation runs deeper than you initially realize. Human populations that have lived in extremely cold environments for millennia show measurable physiological differences from those in temperate or tropical zones. The Saka people, the indigenous inhabitants of Yakutia, have higher basal metabolic rates than most populations, meaning their bodies burn more calories at rest just to generate heat. Their bodies also show differences in how they distribute fat, with more subcutaneous insulation and enhanced circulation to the extremities compared to what you'd expect. Some researchers have found that the Saka and other cold-adapted populations have genetic variations affecting fatty acid metabolism and thermogenesis, the process by which the body generates heat. It's evolution in action, written in blood and bone and mitochondria. But genetics only tell part of the story. Your body, a body that evolved in temperate zones and has spent most of its time in climate-controlled environments, can also adapt to extreme cold, just on a much faster, more temporary timescale. This is called acclimatization, and it's already beginning as you sit at the family's dinner table, working your way through a bewildering array of dishes. Within weeks of exposure to serious cold, your peripheral blood vessels learn to dilate more effectively in cold conditions, a response called cold-induced vasodilation that helps prevent frostbite. Your shivering response becomes more efficient. You might even start producing more brown adipose tissue, brown fat, which is metabolically active and generates heat directly rather than just insulating like regular white fat. Babies have lots of brown fat. Adults usually don't, except when they're regularly exposed to cold. In Yakutia, your body would essentially try to turn back the clock and become a more effective heat-generating machine. Eat, Adalina urges, piling more food onto your plate. You are too thin. Winter here will eat you alive if you don't have reserves. She's not being metaphorical. In extreme cold, your caloric needs skyrocket. Just maintaining body temperature can require an extra 1,000 to 1,500 calories per day compared to temperate conditions, and that's before you do any actual physical work. Mikhail, who works outside much of the day tending to the animals and maintaining equipment, probably consumes between 4,000 and 5,000 calories daily in winter. Adalina herself, who does less outdoor work, still eats what would be considered a substantial amount anywhere else. You glance down at your own plate. Mounds of fatty meat, thick slabs of bread, butter in quantities that would horrify a cardiologist, and understand that this isn't indulgence. It's fuel. The meal includes stroganina, which you learn is raw fish, specifically whitefish or salmon, that's been frozen solid and then shaved into thin, translucent curls like some kind of icy carpaccio. You're handed a small dish of salt and encouraged to dip and eat. It's strange, almost sashimi-like but colder, and the texture is both delicate and weirdly satisfying. Flash frozen by nature. Dmitri explains in careful English he's been practicing. Fish caught, left outside 5 minutes, frozen completely. Bacteria cannot grow in this cold. Safer than fresh fish in summer. He's right, at these temperatures most bacteria go dormant or die, making Yakutia one of the few places on Earth where leaving meat outside to freeze is actually the most hygienic storage method available. There's also a soup called salamat, made from reindeer milk, butter, and flour, thick enough to stand a spoon in, and another dish of boiled horse meat that's surprisingly tender and flavorful. Njurgen, watching you navigate the spread with obvious uncertainty, grins and says, "Wait until you try the blood." Your expression must betray your thoughts because the whole family laughs. Adalina brings out a bowl of what looks like dark pudding, frozen reindeer blood mixed with fat and berries. It's called khan, and it's considered a delicacy. You take a tentative bite, expecting horror, but it's actually not bad. Rich, metallic, yes, but also slightly sweet from the berries, and the fat content makes it satisfying in a way you can't quite articulate. Iron, Mikhail says, tapping his chest. Blood gives iron. Iron makes strong blood. Strong blood carries oxygen, makes heat. Everything here has purpose. He's absolutely correct, though he's probably unaware of the specific biochemistry. Iron is crucial for hemoglobin production, and people living in extreme cold benefit from higher hemoglobin levels to maximize oxygen delivery to tissues, which in turn supports the metabolic furnaces keeping them warm. The traditional Yakutian diet, heavy in organ meats, blood, and fat, is almost perfectly calibrated to support life in extreme cold, providing not just calories but the specific micronutrients needed for cold adaptation. Modern nutritionists studying the traditional diet have found it remarkably balanced despite its near-total absence of fruits and vegetables for most of the year. Vitamin C comes from raw organ meats and fermented foods, vitamin D from fish and the occasional burst of summer sun stored in body fat, minerals from blood and bone marrow. It's a diet that would horrify any vegan and fascinate any biochemist. After dinner, you sit in the warm main room, sipping tea. The first of what you'll learn is about 6 to 8 cups per day. Hydration is critical in extreme cold because the air is so dry that you lose moisture with every breath, and dehydration reduces your body's ability to regulate temperature. But you can't just drink cold water. That would force your body to spend precious calories heating it to body temperature. So tea. Endless tea. Hot, sweet, sometimes with milk or butter, drunk throughout the day like a warming ritual. Historians still argue whether the tea-drinking tradition here came from Russian influence during the colonial period or from earlier trade routes with China and Mongolia, but regardless of origin, it's now as fundamental to Yakutian survival as fur hats and insulated boots. Mikhail tells you about his grandfather, who lived to 93 and claimed to have never been sick a day in his life. He used to say the cold burns away weakness, Mikhail says, his eyes distant with memory. Every morning, even in deep winter, he would go outside in just his undershirt for 5 minutes. Said it made his blood strong. You blink, trying to imagine voluntarily standing outside in minus 60 degrees Celsius in your underwear, and failing completely. But Mikhail insists it's true, and variations of this practice, brief, intense cold exposure, are actually documented among longtime Yakutian residents. Some researchers suggest it triggers a beneficial stress response, ramping up the body's cold defense mechanisms. Others think it's just survivorship bias. The people who could tolerate such practices were already genetically and physiologically gifted for cold survival, so of course they lived long lives. "Can I ask something?" you venture, and the family nods encouragingly. How do your bodies deal with the breathing thing? Every breath I take feels like I'm inhaling knives. Adelina and Dmitri exchange knowing looks. "You breathe wrong," Dmitri says, not unkindly. "Watch." He demonstrates, breathing in through his nose in a slow, controlled manner, his chest barely moving. Small breaths through nose. Nose warms air before it reaches lungs. Big gasping breaths through mouth. He shakes his head. "That's how you freeze lung tissue." This sounds dramatic, but it's actually a real risk. At extreme temperatures, rapid mouth breathing can cause cold-induced bronchoconstriction. Your airways literally spasm and narrow in response to the freezing air, making breathing even harder. Prolonged exposure can even cause ice crystal formation in lung tissue, leading to a condition sometimes called frost lung in the old literature. Modern cold-weather athletes and polar explorers know about this and use special masks or breathing techniques to pre-warm air. But the Saka people figured it out through trial and error generations ago. Breathe wrong, die. Breathe right, live. Evolution doesn't grade on a curve. Nurgen, who's been scrolling through her phone, yes, there's internet here, though it's not exactly blazing, looks up and says, "My biology teacher says we might have Neanderthal genes for cold." Is true. You glance at Mikhail, who shrugs, unbothered by his daughter's casual drop of Neanderthal ancestry. It's actually a fascinating scientific question. Some genetic studies have suggested that modern humans inherited certain cold adaptation genes from Neanderthals and Denisovans through ancient interbreeding. Genes affecting skin and hair development, fat distribution, and metabolism show traces of archaic human DNA in some populations, particularly those in northern latitudes. Whether the Saka people specifically carry such genes is still being researched, but the idea that your ancient human ancestors might have borrowed genetic cold weather gear from other hominid species is no longer considered fringe science. Maybe, you tell Nurgen, science is still figuring it out, but even without Neanderthal genes, humans are incredibly adaptable. Your bodies, all of you, they're doing things mine can't do yet, but could learn if I stayed long enough. Dmitri seems pleased by this and offers to take you outside tomorrow to help with the animals. "You will see how body learns," he promises. "First day, you freeze in 10 minutes. After 1 week, maybe 20 minutes. After 1 month, maybe you last an hour." He grins. "Or maybe you go home before then. Most tourists do." The night deepens and you're shown to your room. A small, warm space with a bed piled high with furs and blankets. You notice the window has 4 separate panes, each with an air gap between them, creating layers of insulation. Even so, frost has formed intricate patterns on the innermost pane, crystalline fractals that catch the lamplight. You touch the glass gently and your fingertip comes away wet, condensation from the room's warmth meeting the window's cold. The temperature gradient between inside and outside is more than 80 degrees Celsius. That's like living on the border between 2 different planets. As you burrow into the furs, you think about what Adelina said at dinner. "Winter here will eat you alive, but the people here don't let themselves be eaten. They've changed bodies, culture, daily practices to not just survive but to thrive. Their children go to school in minus 50 degrees Celsius. They raise cattle and horses in temperatures that would kill those animals anywhere else. They've built cities on permafrost, developed cuisines that sound bizarre but work perfectly, and created a society that functions smoothly in conditions that most of the world would consider uninhabitable. And it all starts with the body, with metabolic furnaces burning hot, with blood vessels that know when to constrict and when to dilate, with the simple, profound wisdom of holding snow in your mouth when your nose bleeds, because out here everything has to work and work right now or you don't get a second chance. Your nose tingles again, and you reach up to touch it, half expecting blood. But it's dry, just cold. Your body is learning cell by cell, breath by breath. You're not Yakutia, not yet and maybe not ever, but for tonight, wrapped in reindeer fur in a house that stands on stilts above eternal ice, you're at least beginning to understand what it means to let the cold remake you into something tougher, stranger, and more resilient than you ever thought possible. Outside, The temperature drops to minus 61 degrees Celsius. Inside, you sleep like the dead, your body working overtime even in rest, building its defenses against a cold that has no mercy and offers no compromises. Morning arrives not with light but with sound. A deep, resonant cracking noise that jerks you from sleep like a gunshot. You bolt upright in the nest of furs, heart hammering, and hear it again. Crack. Then another further away. For a disorienting moment, you think the house is breaking apart, that the stilts have finally given way and you're about to plunge through frozen ground. But then Adelina's voice drifts through the door, calm and almost amused. Is just the cold. Buildings talk in winter. Go back to sleep if you want. Just the cold. As if that explains everything. Later, over breakfast, more tea, thick porridge with butter melting into golden pools, slabs of bread. Mikhail elaborates. Everything contracts in extreme cold. Wood, metal, concrete. Different materials contract at different rates, so they pull against each other, and he claps his hands together sharply. Crack. Sometimes sounds like gunfire, sometimes like trees splitting. You get used to it. You're not sure you'll ever get used to your house groaning and snapping like it's alive, but you nod anyway, spooning porridge into your mouth and trying not to think about structural integrity. The sun is up now, sort of. It's 9:30 in the morning, and the sky has progressed from black to a deep, bruised purple, with the sun lurking just barely above the horizon like it can't be bothered to commit to the whole rising thing. The light it provides is weak and slanted, casting everything in shades of blue and gray. Dmitri is already outside. You can see him through the quadruple-paned window, a dark figure moving among even darker shapes that must be the animals. He's been out there for over an hour already, and you wonder how his face hasn't frozen solid. The house, you say, gesturing around. Why is it built like this? I mean, I know about the stilts and the permafrost, but everything else seems so specific. Adelina brightens. You've hit on a topic she clearly loves. Every single thing about Yakutian house is survival, she says, leading you on a tour. Watch. She takes you to the entrance, which isn't just a door but a whole system. There's an outer door, then a small chamber, an Arctic entry or cold trap, and then an inner door. Two-door system keeps cold air from coming directly inside when you enter. You open outer door, step into cold trap, close outer door. Only then open inner door. Otherwise, all heat escapes in seconds. The cold trap is unheated and functions as a buffer zone, and you notice it's full of useful items. Tools, extra firewood, boots in various states of readiness. Also storage for things that need to stay cold but not freeze solid. Adelina explains. Some foods, some medicines. Out here in winter, nature is refrigerator. But house interior is too warm for things that need refrigeration. It's a detail that seems obvious once explained but would never occur to you. In Yakutia, you don't need a refrigerator in winter. The entire outside world is below freezing. But you do need a place that's cold but not catastrophically so, hence the cold trap. Modern problems require ancient solutions or something like that. The windows, as you noticed last night, are engineering marvels in their own right. For panes of glass with air gaps between each creates multiple insulating layers, and Adelina points out that some older houses have windows with 5 or even 6 panes. Heat escapes through windows faster than through walls, she says. Glass is thin, conducts heat, so we make barriers, air gaps stop conduction. Also, see how small windows are. You do notice, the windows are perhaps half the size of what you'd expect in a normal house, offering limited views of the outside. Big windows mean big heat loss. Beautiful view not worth freezing to death. We make windows small, thick, many layers. The walls themselves are remarkably thick, you'd guess at least 40 centimeters, and Mikhail explains they're made of multiple layers. Wood framing, insulation, traditionally moss or sawdust, now more often modern materials, an air gap, more insulation, and then interior paneling. The roof is even thicker, sometimes over half a meter of insulation, because heat rises and a thin roof would bleed warmth into the atmosphere like a wound. Every calorie of heat is precious, Mikhail says. We burn wood or coal to make heat, and wood must be cut, hauled, stored. Coal must be bought, delivered. Nothing is free, so house must hold heat like like a thermos holds hot tea. It's a perfect analogy, and you suddenly understand that you're not in a house so much as an elaborate insulated container designed to maintain a tiny pocket of survivable warmth in an ocean of killing cold. The foundation, those stilts you noticed, turn out to be even more critical than you realized. Permafrost in Yakutia can extend hundreds of meters deep, ice-filled soil that's been frozen for millennia. It's stable as long as it stays frozen, but introduce heat and it becomes a soupy, unstable mess that will swallow buildings, roads, and anything else unfortunate enough to be resting on it. Every year we check the stilts, Mikhail says, his tone serious now. Make sure they're level, make sure no settling. If house starts to tilt, means permafrost underneath is melting, and then you have maybe one season to fix it before house is ruined. Some buildings in Yakutsk have been abandoned because of permafrost thaw, their foundations cracked and twisted, their walls leaning at drunken angles. Climate change is making this worse. As global temperatures rise, the permafrost is warming, and what was stable for thousands of years is suddenly not. Historians still argue whether the traditional stilt architecture will be sufficient for future warming scenarios, or whether entirely new building methods will need to be developed. You venture into the cold trap to prepare for going outside, and the temperature difference is immediate. It's maybe minus 20 degrees Celsius in here, which feels relatively mild compared to the minus 59 degrees Celsius thermometer reading outside. Adalina helps you layer properly, and you realize you've been doing everything wrong. First, a thin base layer of synthetic fabric against your skin. Not cotton, she warns. Cotton holds moisture, kills you. Then a thicker insulating layer, then another, then a wind-breaking outer layer. For your legs, the same principle. Thin base, insulated pants, wind pants over the top. 2 pairs of socks, thin inner, thick wool outer. Inside boots that look like they could survive the moon landing. A balaclava for your face. A fur hat with ear flaps. Mittens over glove liners. And a scarf to wrap around everything because exposed skin is a liability you can't afford. The mouth scarf is critical, Adalina says, demonstrating how to tie it so it covers your nose and mouth but doesn't restrict breathing. Your breath is warm, moist. It freezes on scarf instead of in your lungs or on your face. Every hour or so, you must change to dry scarf, or the frozen moisture builds up and actually makes you colder. She shows you her collection of scarves, at least a dozen, hanging by the door, and you understand these aren't fashion accessories. They're disposable filters between you and death, and you'll go through several in a day of outdoor work. Finally suited up, you look like the Michelin Man's Arctic cousin, barely able to bend your arms or legs. Adalina nods approvingly. Good. Now you look like you might survive 20 minutes instead of 10. She's joking, probably, but the confidence in her voice isn't exactly overwhelming. You step toward the outer door, and she stops you. One more thing. Never touch metal with bare skin. Never lean against metal. Never put your face near metal. Metal in this cold will freeze to your skin instantly, not in seconds, instantly, and when you pull away, you leave skin behind. Understand? You nod vigorously, suddenly very aware of the metal door handle in front of you. Adalina pulls her mitten on completely and opens the door using the fabric as a barrier. The cold that rushes in even to the cold trap is shocking, a physical presence that seems to have weight and intention. You follow Adalina through the outer door, and stepping outside is like stepping into another dimension. The air is so cold it almost feels thick, resistant, as if you're pushing through some kind of invisible barrier. Your first breath through the scarf is metallic and sharp, and even filtered through fabric, you can feel the cold penetrating. Your eyes immediately begin to water from the temperature shock, and you have to blink rapidly to keep the tears from freezing on your eyelashes. The world is utterly transformed. Everything is covered in a thick layer of hoarfrost, crystalline ice formations that make even the most mundane objects look like they belong in a fairy tale. The fence posts wear fuzzy white coats. The roof of the house glitters with frost. The firewood stacked against the shed looks like it's been dipped in sugar. And everywhere, there's the silence of deep cold, broken only by the crunch of snow under your boots and the occasional crack of contracting materials. It's a sound that's more absence than presence. A quiet so profound it feels like pressure on your ears. Dmitri appears from behind the animal shelter, his face almost completely obscured by frost. His eyebrows are white, his eyelashes glittering with ice, the scarf over his mouth and nose crusted with frozen breath. He raises a mittened hand in greeting and approaches. "You came out," he says, his voice muffled. "Good. Come see the cows." He starts walking and you follow, each step deliberate. The snow beneath your feet is strange. Not soft and fluffy like snow you're used to, but squeaky and crystalline, almost like styrofoam. "Too cold for wet snow," Dmitri explains, noticing your confusion. "This cold, snow doesn't melt at all under pressure. Stays dry, makes that sound." The animal shelter is another architectural marvel. Built low and partially dug into the ground, with thick walls and minimal openings. "Animals generate heat," Dmitri says as he opens the door, using his mitten, you notice. "We keep them together, use their body heat to warm the space. Still cold inside, maybe -25 or -30, but better than outside." Inside, you find several cows huddled together, their breath creating a constant fog. They're a local breed, Saka cattle. Smaller than European cattle, stockier, with thick winter coats that make them look like mobile shag carpets. "Only cattle in the world that can survive here," Dmitri says with obvious pride. "Try to bring regular cattle? Dead in days. But these, their ancestors have been here centuries. Their blood, their fat, everything is adapted." One cow turns to look at you with profound indifference, frost coating her muzzle and eyelashes. You can see her breath pluming in the dim interior, and you wonder what it must be like to be a cow in Yakutia, whether some ancestral cow memory dreams of warmer pastures or if, after generations, this is simply how cow life is supposed to be. Dmitri moves among them confidently, checking each one, running mittened hands over their backs, looking for any signs of distress or injury. "This time of year, they don't go outside much," he explains. "We bring them hay, water, though water is hard because it freezes so fast we must warm it constantly. In spring, summer, they go out, eat grass, get fat. In winter, they stay here, survive on what we stored." You help Dmitri distribute hay, a task that seems simple until you realize your fingers are already going numb despite the mittens and glove liners. Every movement feels clumsy, like you're operating someone else's hands via remote control. Dmitri notices your struggle and shakes his head. "Wiggle your fingers. Keep blood moving. Standing still, moving slow. That's when freeze happens." You follow his advice, making fists and releasing them inside the mittens, and gradually sensation returns, though it's accompanied by a pins and needles sensation that's distinctly unpleasant. After maybe 15 minutes, though it feels like an hour, you step back outside, and the temperature difference is notable. Somehow, -30 degrees Celsius inside the animal shelter felt almost warm compared to the -59 degrees Celsius outside. Your face feels tight and strange, like the skin doesn't quite fit anymore, and you reach up to touch your cheek through the scarf. Bad idea, even that slight pressure is painful, the skin sensitive and borderline frozen. "Don't touch face," Dmitri warns. "Increases frostbite risk. Leave everything alone. Let layers do their job." You walk around the property, Dmitri pointing out various features. The shed where tools are kept, designed with thick doors and careful organization because a misplaced tool in winter can mean the difference between a quick repair and a dangerous delay. The outdoor toilet, yes, outdoor, because indoor plumbing is a challenge when water pipes freeze solid, which is mercifully equipped with a thick insulated seat but is still, you imagine, a uniquely character-building experience at -60 degrees Celsius. The storage pit where root vegetables are kept, dug deep into the permafrost, which maintains a constant temperature just below freezing year-round. A natural freezer that predates electricity by centuries. Everything here is intentional. Every structure, every practice, every tiny detail of daily life has been optimized over generations for one single purpose: staying alive when the outside world wants you dead. The houses aren't beautiful in any conventional sense. They're squat, over-insulated, perched on stilts like nervous birds, but they're perfect expressions of form following function. Beauty, you're beginning to understand, is a luxury. Survival is the imperative that shapes everything else. Your 20 minutes are up, and Dmitri can tell before you say anything. You're shifting your weight constantly, your movements becoming sluggish, your attention drifting. Inside, he commands and you don't argue. Back through the cold trap, through the inner door, into the blessed warmth of the house, where Adelina takes one look at you and hands you hot tea without a word. You wrap your still cold hands around the cup and feel the heat seeping through the gloves you haven't yet removed. Outside, the house cracks and groans, negotiating with the cold. Inside, you sit and sip and slowly thaw, understanding a little more about what it means to live in a place where architecture isn't about style or statement but about the basic, profound challenge of creating warmth in a world of ice. By noon, though the sun has barely bothered to climb higher in the sky, you're seated at the family table again, and the sheer quantity of food being laid out is staggering. This isn't a special occasion. This is just lunch. There's a massive pot of soup, plates of sliced frozen fish, bowls of thick sour cream, hunks of dark bread, butter in a quantity that would make your arteries file a formal complaint, and some kind of meat dish that's giving off steam and smells richly of fat and salt. Adelina notices your wide-eyed stare and chuckles. You worked outside for 20 minutes. You think that was enough? Dmitri worked for 3 hours this morning. Mikhail for hours. I was outside 1 hour hanging laundry. Yes, we still hang laundry outside. It freeze-dries in minutes. All of us, we need fuel. You do the mental math and realize that in your 20 minutes outside, you were shivering almost constantly, your muscles working overtime to generate heat. Dmitri, out for 3 hours, must have burned through thousands of calories just maintaining body temperature. Never mind the actual physical labor of caring for animals. Hauling hay, breaking ice off water troughs. How many calories do you eat in a day? You ask, genuinely curious. Mikhail shrugs. Never counted. Enough to not be hungry to stay warm. Maybe 4,000, 5,000. Winter is expensive for the body. The soup is coriata, made from beef bones that have been boiled for hours until the marrow has dissolved into the broth, creating a rich, fatty liquid that's almost gelatinous. You ladle some into your bowl, and Adelina immediately adds a massive dollop of sour cream. Fat on fat, she says approvingly. This is how we eat here. Your modern diet books, your low-fat this, your salad that would kill you in 1 week in Yakutian winter. Fat is insulation. Fat is fuel. Fat is life. She's not wrong. In extreme cold, your body's preferred fuel source is actually fat, which provides more than twice the calories per gram compared to carbohydrates or protein. The traditional Yakutian diet, heavy in animal fats, organ meats, and fermented dairy, is almost ketogenic by modern standards, optimized for an environment where every calorie of heat generation matters. The stroganina, that frozen raw fish you tried last night, appears again, and you're getting better at eating it. The technique is to take a curl of the frozen fish, dip it in salt mixed with black pepper, and let it melt slightly in your mouth before chewing. It's surprisingly refreshing, and Dmitri explains that it's considered a delicacy, served at celebrations and special gatherings. In summer, we can't make it, he says. Fish must be frozen solid within minutes of catching, and only natural cold does it right. Freezer fish tastes wrong. There's something almost poetic about a dish that can only exist in the harshest season, a culinary expression of winter itself. Jurgen, who's been quiet until now, suddenly speaks up. Tell them about the horse milk, she says with a mischievous grin, and Mikhail laughs. Ah yes, Kumis, you will try this. He goes to what you assume is a refrigerator, though in winter it might actually be a warming box to keep things from freezing solid, and brings out a jar of cloudy white liquid. Fermented mare's milk, he announces. Traditional drink. Very nutritious, slightly alcoholic, good for digestion. He pours you a small cup, and you regard it suspiciously. It smells sour and yeasty, not entirely pleasant, and when you take a cautious sip, it's fizzy, tangy, and strange in a way you can't quite categorize. Not bad exactly, but definitely an acquired taste. Kumis has been made by nomadic people in this region for thousands of years, Adelina explains. Horses were brought here centuries ago. Shouldn't survive in this cold, but Yakutian horses are special, like the cows. Hardy. In summer, we milk the mares, ferment the milk with special bacteria, and it becomes kumis. Gives vitamins, probiotics, even some alcohol for warmth and morale. Historians still argue whether kumi's production was learned from Mongol peoples to the south or developed independently, but regardless, it's been part of Yakutian culture long enough to be woven into the social and nutritional fabric of life here. In a place where fresh fruits and vegetables are unavailable for 8 months of the year, fermented foods like kumis provide crucial nutrients and beneficial bacteria that support digestion and immune function. The main dish is horse meat, boiled, not roasted, to preserve every bit of fat and moisture. It's served in thick slabs with boiled potatoes and onions, and the meat is surprisingly tender and flavorful, darker and richer than beef. Horse is traditional meat here, Mikhail says. Horses can dig through snow to find grass, can survive the cold better than most animals. We raise them, love them, but also eat them. This is not contradictory. This is survival. There's a directness to the relationship with food here that's uncommon in modern urban life, where meat comes plastic-wrapped and sanitized, its origins obscured. Here, you're eating an animal that Dmitri probably tended this morning, and everyone at the table is completely comfortable with this fact. You ask about vegetables, and Adalina waves toward a shelf where you can see jars of pickled and preserved items. In summer, we grow potatoes, onions, some cabbage, carrots in greenhouses. Very short growing season, maybe 90 days, sometimes less. We preserve everything, pickle, can, dry. In winter, we eat what we saved, plus what we can import. But imported vegetables are expensive and not very fresh by the time they arrive. She brings over a jar of pickled tomatoes, clearly a prized item, and adds a few to your plate. They're sour, salty, and taste intensely of summer, a sharp contrast to the frozen world outside. Tea, as you're learning, is the constant companion to every meal. The family goes through multiple pots per day, and you're beginning to understand why. Hydration, Dmitri explains when you comment on the volume of tea consumed. The air is so dry in winter, humidity may be 5–10%, that you lose water with every breath. But you can't feel thirst the same way in cold, so people forget to drink and become dehydrated. Dehydration makes you cold because blood becomes thicker, circulates poorly. So we drink tea constantly, all day. Hot tea, warm tea, even room temperature tea. Always tea. The samovar, a traditional Russian tea urn that keeps water hot continuously, sits in the corner like a small, faithful furnace, steam rising from its spout, ready to provide hydration at a moment's notice. What about alcohol? You ask because you've heard stories about vodka and Russian winters, and you're curious how much is stereotype and how much is survival strategy. Mikhail's face becomes more serious. Alcohol is complicated here, he says carefully. Yes, some people drink vodka to feel warm, but it's false warmth. Alcohol makes you feel warm because it dilates blood vessels, brings warm blood to skin surface. But this means you lose heat faster, and you don't notice how cold you're getting because you feel warm. People die this way. Drink vodka, feel fine, go outside, freeze to death because they didn't realize their core temperature was dropping. He pauses, then adds, that said, a small amount of alcohol with a big meal and no intention of going outside? This can be social, can be pleasant. But alcohol and cold work are enemies. The meal continues for over an hour, a slow and communal affair where food is shared, stories are told, and the outside cold is temporarily forgotten. You notice that everyone eats with a kind of focused appreciation, not rushing, savoring the warmth and calories and social connection. This isn't just refueling. It's a ritual that affirms life in the face of a climate that seems determined to end it. When Adalina brings out dessert, a simple cake made with local berries preserved from summer and sweetened with precious sugar, it feels like a small victory, a declaration that even here, in temperatures that would kill most humans, there's room for sweetness and pleasure. After the meal, Adalina shows you the preserving room, a small, unheated chamber where jars and containers of summer's bounty are stored. There are berries you don't recognize. Lingonberries, cloudberries, bilberries, all preserved in sugar or frozen. There are dried fish, hanging in rows like strange ornaments. There are sealed containers of rendered fat, white and pure, waiting to be used in cooking or, in extreme circumstances, eaten straight for pure caloric energy. This room feeds us through winter, Adalina says. We begin preserving in July, work through September. Every berry picked, every fish caught, every bit of fat rendered. Nothing wasted. Cannot afford waste when winter is 8 months long. You're struck by the sheer amount of planning and labor that goes into making winter survivable here. It's not just enduring cold. It's an entire annual cycle of preparation, preservation, and careful resource management. Modern conveniences have made some aspects easier. Chest freezers, imported goods, electricity for heating, but the fundamental relationship between food and survival remains unchanged. You eat to live, and living means consuming extraordinary amounts of fat, protein, and calories that your body converts into the heat necessary to not freeze solid. Dmitri clears the table, and you notice he moves with a practiced efficiency, not rushing but not dawdling either. After lunch, I go out again, he mentions. Need to check the horses, make sure their shelter is secure. Wind is picking up. You glance toward the window and notice for the first time that yes, the frost crystals on the glass are moving, vibrating slightly. Wind in extreme cold is particularly dangerous. It strips away the thin layer of warm air your body tries to maintain around itself, accelerating heat loss through wind chill. A minus 50 degrees Celsius day with no wind is survivable with proper clothing. A minus 50 degrees Celsius day with 30 kilometers per hour winds? That creates an effective temperature closer to minus 70 degrees Celsius or worse, cold enough to cause frostbite in under 5 minutes on any exposed skin. How do you know when it's too dangerous to go out? You ask, and Mikhail considers the question carefully. Experience, mostly. You learn to read the cold. Temperature is one thing, but wind, humidity in the air, how your face feels the instant you step outside. These tell you more. Some days, minus 55 feels manageable. Other days, minus 45 feels deadly. Your body knows before your mind knows, if you listen to it. This kind of embodied wisdom, knowledge that lives in the body rather than in books, is increasingly rare in the modern world. But here it's essential. You can't Google your way out of frostbite. You have to know, in your bones and skin and lungs, what the cold is doing and what it's capable of. Nurgen, scrolling through her phone again, suddenly announces, "Weather says minus 63 tonight." Everyone at the table pauses, and there's a moment of collective assessment. "Check the wood supply," Adalina says to Mikhail, "and make sure the cold trapdoor is sealed tight. Last time it got that cold, we went through twice the usual firewood." Mikhail nods, and Dmitri automatically says, "I'll bring extra hay to the animals. They'll need it." You watch this rapid, coordinated response to a weather forecast and realize you're witnessing something like a military operation, everyone understanding their role in the collective effort to survive the coming night. As the afternoon fades and the sun, having barely made an appearance, begins its retreat, you help Adalina prepare the evening's tea service. The samovar needs refilling, cups need washing, and there's a specific type of bread she wants to bake before the temperature drops further. You work in the warm kitchen, hands busy, mind processing everything you've learned about eating in Yakutia. It's not about cuisine in the way you normally understand it. It's about calories, nutrients, warmth, and community. It's about preserving summer to survive winter, about honoring the animals that give their lives to keep you warm from the inside out, about the simple, profound act of sitting together around a table and eating food that transforms directly into heat and life. Outside, the wind picks up, and you hear it moaning around the corners of the house. Inside, the stove glows warm, the smell of baking bread fills the air, and you sip your 6th cup of tea, feeling it spread warmth through your chest. Tomorrow, Dmitri promises he'll take you to see the horses. Tonight, you'll eat again, because here you always eat again, fuel for the furnace that is your body, fighting to stay warm in a world of endless cold. The next morning, you make your first serious mistake. You're dressing in the cold trap, layering up as Adalina taught you, and you notice your glove liner has fallen onto a metal shelf. Without thinking, because your brain is still half asleep and operating on autopilot from a lifetime spent in places where metal is just metal, you reach out with your bare hand to grab it. Your fingertips make contact with the steel shelf for perhaps half a second before your nervous system screams at you and you jerk your hand back. But half a second is enough. You stare at your fingertips in horror. The skin where you touched the metal has gone instantly white, and there's a sensation that's not quite pain but something worse. A deep, burning cold that seems to penetrate straight to the bone. Adelina, who was checking something in the other room, appears immediately, alerted by your sharp intake of breath. She takes one look at your hand and sighs. "What did I tell you about metal?" she asks, but her tone is more resigned than angry. She's seen this before, probably hundreds of times with visitors and children who had to learn the hard way. She guides you back inside, sits you down, and examines your fingers under the light. "You're lucky," she pronounces. "Just surface freeze, not deep frostbite. Skin will be sensitive for a few days, maybe peel a little, but no permanent damage." She brings over a bowl of cool, not warm, not cold water and has you soak your fingers. "Never warm frostbitten tissue quickly," she instructs. "Causes more damage. Slow warming, gentle warming. Let body heat return naturally." The sensation as your fingers warm is intensely unpleasant. A pins and needles feeling multiplied by 1,000, and you grit your teeth and endure it, learning a lesson that no amount of verbal warning could have truly conveyed. "Metal in extreme cold is like fire," Adelina says as you sit there, fingers throbbing. "Touch it, get burned." The science is simple. Metal conducts heat very efficiently, so when you touch it with bare skin, it pulls heat out of your tissue faster than your blood can replace it. Instant freeze. I've seen people lose patches of skin from touching a metal door handle. Seen someone's tongue frozen to a metal railing because they were foolish enough to lick it on a dare. She shakes her head at the memory. Children here learn this before they learn to read. But you didn't grow up here, so you learn it now the hard way. The phenomenon she's describing is thermal conductivity, and in extreme cold, it becomes weaponized. Steel, aluminum, and other metals have high thermal conductivity. They're excellent at transferring heat, which makes them great for cooking pots and radiators, but deadly in subarctic conditions. When your warm skin, around 32 to 34 degrees Celsius, contacts metal that's been sitting at minus 60 degrees Celsius, heat transfers from your flesh to the metal at an extraordinary rate, freezing the water in your skin cells almost instantly. The frozen cells expand, their membranes rupture, and tissue damage occurs in seconds. Wood, by contrast, has low thermal conductivity, which is why wooden tools, handles, and structures are preferred in extreme cold. They don't suck the warmth out of you the way metal does. Your fingers return to a more normal color, though they're tender and hypersensitive. Adelina pronounces you fit for duty and adds an extra pair of mittens to your gear. "Today," she announces, "you help Mikhail with the vehicle maintenance. You will learn about metal and cold in other ways too." This sounds ominous, but you're not given a choice. Mikhail is already outside, and apparently there's a truck that needs attention before it decides to stop working entirely. Outside, the temperature has warmed to minus 54 degrees Celsius, which everyone agrees is practically balmy. The wind has died down, which makes it feel even more reasonable, though reasonable is a deeply relative term when you're essentially standing on the surface of a hostile ice planet. Mikhail is in the garage, a heated space, though heated means it's maybe minus 10 degrees Celsius inside, which is just warm enough to prevent tools and engine parts from becoming unbearably cold to touch. The garage houses a modified UAZ van, a boxy Soviet-era vehicle that looks like it's been through several wars and maybe a few apocalypses. "This truck," Mikhail says with obvious affection, patting its hood, "is 30 years old and has never failed me, but this requires work. Every day in winter, work." He pops the hood, and you peer into the engine compartment, which looks about as complex as you expected, except there are several modifications you don't recognize. "See this?" He points to what looks like an electric heating element attached to the engine block. "Block heater. Keeps oil from becoming solid. Without this, engine oil at minus 60 is like honey, no thicker, like tar. Engine cannot turn over, cannot start." He shows you the electrical cord running from the block heater to an outlet in the garage. "In winter, if I plan to drive, I plug in 2 hours before. Warms oil, warms coolant, makes starting possible. Some people, they leave their cars running all winter, never turn off from November to March. Uses much fuel, but guarantees car starts when needed. The idea of a vehicle running continuously for 4 months straight seems absurd until you remember where you are, and then it seems like simple pragmatism. Historians still argue whether the environmental impact of idling vehicles all winter is offset by the practical necessity in a region where public transportation is limited and a non-starting vehicle in extreme cold could mean death. Mikhail points out other modifications: a battery warmer, extra insulation around the fuel lines, a special winter-grade diesel fuel that's been treated with additives to prevent gelling. Regular diesel turns to gel around -15 degrees Celsius, he explains. Special winter diesel, good to maybe -45. Below that, he shrugs. You pray, or you add kerosene to thin it, or you keep the tank warm somehow. Some people wrap fuel tanks in insulation, even add small heaters. Fuel is blood of vehicle. If blood stops flowing, vehicle dies. He has you help change the oil, and you quickly discover that, even with gloves, touching metal tools in the garage is uncomfortable. Every wrench, every socket, every bolt seems to radiate cold, leaching warmth through the insulated gloves. Mikhail works with practiced efficiency, his movements economical and precise. Drop tools are lost tools, he says. A wrench falls into snow, you might not find it until spring thaw. So we work carefully, deliberately. Rush equals mistakes equals danger. The oil that drains from the engine is shockingly thick and sluggish, barely flowing, and Mikhail shows you the viscosity rating. 0W40, formulated specifically for extreme cold. Regular oil would be solid block by now, he notes. Even this specialized oil, designed for Arctic conditions, looks more like molasses than the free-flowing liquid you're used to. You help pour in the new oil, and the contrast is remarkable. It flows normally, at least at the relatively warm temperature of the garage. This oil will last until spring, then we change again to summer weight. Different seasons, different requirements. Next is the tire pressure check, and this reveals another quirk of extreme cold: air contracts. What was proper pressure in September is now underinflated, Mikhail explains, using a gauge to check each tire. Cold air is denser, takes up less space. We must check and adjust every week, sometimes more often if temperature swings are dramatic. The physics is straightforward, the ideal gas law, PV equals nRT, which you dimly remember from school, but the practical implications are novel. Underinflated tires in deep cold mean reduced traction, increased risk of getting stuck, and potential tire damage. While you're outside, you experience another phenomenon that Adalina mentioned, but that you didn't fully understand. Breathing in extreme cold isn't just uncomfortable. It's potentially dangerous. With each inhalation through your scarf, you're warming the air before it reaches your lungs. But even so, you can feel a tightness in your chest, a resistance that makes breathing feel like work. Breathe too fast, too deep, and you can damage lung tissue, Mikhail warns. The bronchi, the air tubes, they spasm when hit with very cold air. Makes breathing harder, which makes you panic, and breathe faster, which makes it worse. Is a bad cycle. This is exercise-induced bronchoconstriction, exacerbated by extreme cold, and it affects even healthy people at these temperatures. The airways narrow to protect deeper lung tissue from the cold, but this narrowing makes gas exchange less efficient, which triggers the urge to breathe harder, which exposes the airways to more cold. Athletes training in cold weather know about this and use buffs, scarves, or specialized masks to pre-warm air. In Yakutia, everyone knows about it because everyone has experienced it. You help Mikhail check the antifreeze, a bright green liquid that's supposed to prevent the cooling system from freezing. Even antifreeze has limits, he says, using a hydrometer to check the freeze point. This is rated to -65 degrees Celsius. Below that, even antifreeze freezes. Then engine block cracks, coolant system destroyed, engine ruined. A warm garage or constant running is sometimes the only solution. The reading shows the antifreeze is good, properly concentrated, and Mikhail nods with satisfaction. In deep cold, we check everything. Assumptions kill. The headlights get attention next. Plastic lenses can crack in extreme cold, Mikhail explains, running a gloved hand over them. And bulbs sometimes explode from the thermal shock when you turn them on. Hot filament, freezing lens, crack. We use special bulbs, check them constantly. He also points out that the wiper fluid is a special formulation rated to -60 degrees Celsius. Regular wiper fluid freezes at maybe -20, -25. Frozen fluid means no way to clear windshield, no way to see. No see, no drive. No drive. Maybe you die if you're stranded. As you work, your earlier mistake with the metal shelf keeps replaying in your mind, and you're hyper-aware of every surface your hands approach. Mikhail notices your excessive caution and nods approvingly. Good. Fear is healthy here. Fear keeps you careful. Overconfidence is what kills people. Thinking they know the cold, thinking they can relax. The cold never sleeps, never forgives mistakes. It's a grim philosophy, but there's wisdom in it. Complacency in extreme environments is often fatal. After an hour of vehicle maintenance, you're chilled despite the warmth of the garage and the physical activity. Mikhail calls a halt, and you both head inside for tea and a break. Over cups of hot, sweet liquid, he tells you about a cousin who works in the diamond mines further north, where temperatures can hit -70 degrees Celsius in winter. They have special protocols, he says. Workers cannot touch metal with bare skin ever. All tools have insulated handles or rubber coatings. They have heated break rooms every few hundred meters, mandatory warm-up periods every 20 minutes. Even with all these precautions, frostbite and cold injuries are common. The diamond mines of Yakutia are among the most productive in the world, and they operate year-round despite the extreme cold. Workers are paid premium wages to compensate for the harsh conditions, but it's still a brutal existence. Darkness, cold, physical danger, and isolation. Some researchers have studied the psychological and physical toll on mine workers, finding elevated rates of cold-related injuries, vitamin D deficiency from lack of sunlight, and stress-related health issues. Yet the mines continue operating because diamonds are valuable enough to justify the human cost, a calculus that's both economically rational and morally questionable. You sip your tea and flex your fingers, which are still tender from your encounter with the metal shelf. The lesson has been thoroughly learned. In extreme cold, metal is not your friend. It's a conductor of heat, an enemy of exposed flesh, something to be respected and handled with extreme caution. You think about all the metal objects you interact with daily in normal life. Door handles, handrails, phones, keys, and realize that in Yakutia, each of these becomes a potential hazard. Living here means constantly recalibrating your relationship with ordinary objects, treating the mundane as dangerous. Mikhail refills your cup and says, almost casually, "You did well today. Only one small freeze and you learned." Some people, they make same mistake 5-6 times before they learn. Or they never learn, and they go home with fewer fingers than they arrived with. He's not joking, and you have a sudden vision of Yakutian winters as a gauntlet that tests and sometimes breaks those who don't adapt quickly enough. The cold is patient, impartial, and always hungry for the warmth of living things. Your job, everyone's job here, is to deny it that warmth through vigilance, knowledge, and respect for the absolute physics of heat transfer in extreme environments. Outside, the truck sits silent and cold, waiting for the next journey. Inside, you sit and warm and learn, one painful lesson at a time, that survival in Yakutia is a skill practiced daily, with no graduation and no time off for good behavior. You wake on your 4th morning in Yakutia to darkness and the sound of Mikhail already moving around downstairs. It's 6:30 a.m., and the sun won't make its brief, hesitant appearance for another 2.5 hours. You've begun to understand that life here operates on rhythms completely divorced from natural light. You wake in darkness, you work in twilight or artificial light, you eat dinner in darkness, and somewhere in the middle there's a few hours of weak, slanted sunlight that barely qualifies as day. It's disorienting in a way you didn't expect, a constant low-level confusion about what time it actually is. Downstairs, Mikhail is performing his morning ritual, and you watch, fascinated, as he goes through a checklist that seems both elaborate and absolutely essential. First, he checks the thermometer outside the window, -61 degrees Celsius. He notes this in a small notebook, part of a record he's kept for years, tracking temperature fluctuations and patterns. Helps me predict when cold snaps will break. He explains when he notices you watching. Cold doesn't come randomly, has patterns, rhythms. You learn to read them. Next, he checks the wood supply in the cold trap. Enough for today, but he'll need to bring more from the outdoor stack later. He examines the stove, ensuring the fire is burning efficiently, adjusting the damper to optimize heat output. He tests the water pipes. Yes, there's indoor plumbing, but it requires constant vigilance. Pipes are insulated and heat traced with electrical heating cables, he explains. But even so, if the power fails or the heating cable breaks, pipes freeze in hours. Frozen pipes burst. Burst pipes in winter mean no water until spring thaw. So every morning I check. He turns on each faucet briefly, confirming flow, listening to the sound of water moving through pipes. Satisfied, he moves to the next item on his mental checklist, testing the backup generator. The generator sits in a small heated enclosure attached to the house, and Mikhail starts it briefly, letting it run for 2 minutes before shutting it down. Power fails sometimes in deep cold, he says. Lines snap from ice weight, transformers fail. Many things can happen. Generator means we keep heat, keep water flowing, keep alive. So every morning I test. Make sure it works before we need it desperately. This level of systematic preparation seems almost paranoid until you remember that you're living in an environment where a cascade of small failures, power outage, followed by pipe freeze, followed by loss of heat, could easily become life-threatening within hours. The morning ritual isn't paranoia. It's basic risk management in a place where the margin for error is measured in frozen fingertips and hypothermia. Adalina joins you for breakfast, and over the now familiar routine of tea and porridge, she explains more about the daily rhythms of winter survival. Everything we do with backup plans, she says. We never have just one source of water, we have pipes, but also we collect snow to melt if pipes fail. We never have just one source of heat, we have electric heaters, but also wood stove, but also emergency propane if both fail. We never go anywhere alone in deep winter. Always 2 people minimum, so if one has problem, other can help or go for rescue. This redundancy principle extends to every aspect of life. Dmitry keeps his phone fully charged at all times, but also has a backup battery pack, but also knows the location of every neighbor's house within walking distance. The family car is maintained obsessively, but they also have a snowmobile as backup, but also maintain good relationships with neighbors who have vehicles. Food stores are abundant, but they also know where to fish through the ice if needed, but also keep emergency rations that can sustain them for weeks. It's a layered approach to survival, acknowledging that any single system can and will fail, and that survival depends on having a backup for your backup. Today, Atalina announces, you learn the ice test. This sounds both intriguing and vaguely ominous, and you follow her outside into the pre-dawn darkness, headlamp bouncing light across the frost-covered landscape. She leads you to a small creek that runs near the property, now frozen solid, and pulls out an ice auger, a hand-crank drill designed for boring through ice. This creek, we use for supplemental water, she explains. Ice is clean, melts to good water, but we must always check thickness. Ice looks solid, but sometimes has weak spots. Fall through ice in winter, you die. As simple as that. She demonstrates the auger, drilling down through the ice with surprising ease, the blade biting through with a crunching sound. The ice is thick. She measures it at about 80 centimeters before hitting water beneath. Safe, she pronounces. Anything over 30 centimeters is safe for walking. Over 50 centimeters safe for snowmobile. This is safe for small truck if needed. She has you drill your own test hole a few meters away, and you struggle with the auger, your muscles not yet accustomed to the specific motion required. But eventually, you break through and the measurement confirms similar thickness. Every week we test, Adalina says. Sometimes more often if temperature fluctuates. Warm spell, even to just -20 or -30, can weaken ice. Springs or currents under ice can create thin spots. Never assume. Always test. This is another example of the check everything, trust nothing philosophy that permeates life here. The ice looks solid, it's been solid for months, but you still drill a test hole because assumptions kill and verification keeps you alive. She shows you how to read other environmental signs. The color of ice, clear and blue means solid, white or gray means air pockets and weakness. The sound of ice underfoot, Solid cracking is good. Hollow sounds are bad. The presence of frost flowers or ice ridges that indicate pressure points or structural stress. It's an entire literacy of frozen water. Knowledge accumulated over generations and passed down because people who didn't learn it didn't survive to pass on anything. Back at the house, Dmitri is preparing for the day's work with the horses, and he invites you to join him. The horses are kept in a shelter similar to the cow barn, partially underground, thick-walled, designed to trap and hold the animal's body heat. As you approach, you can see steam rising from ventilation gaps, the collective breath and warmth of the animals creating a microclimate inside. Dmitri opens the door, and you're hit with a wall of smell, manure, hay, horse sweat, and warmth. It's maybe minus 25 degrees Celsius inside, which feels tropical compared to the minus 61 degrees Celsius outside. The horses are Yakutian horses, a breed that's shorter and stockier than most horses you've seen, with shaggy winter coats that make them look like mobile haystacks. Their nostrils are crusted with frost, their eyelashes white with ice, but they seem utterly unbothered by the conditions. These horses, Dmitri says with pride, can survive outside in winter if needed. They dig through snow to find grass, can tolerate temperatures to minus 70 degrees Celsius. But we shelter them because we are not cruel, and because sheltered horses stay healthier, work better. One horse, a mare named Kirikan, which Dmitri translates as Dark One, comes over to investigate you, her breath creating clouds of steam. You reach out to touch her nose and are surprised by how warm she feels, how much heat is radiating from her body. Horses are furnaces, Dmitri explains. They eat constantly in winter, hay, grain, whatever we give them, and convert it all to heat. A horse at rest generates heat equivalent to maybe a small space heater. These horses, working in cold, they generate even more. But this means we must feed them huge amounts. A Yakutian horse in winter eats maybe 3 times what same horse eats in summer. He shows you the feeding routine. Hay distributed to each horse, fresh water, kept from freezing by a heated trough that's one of the barn's few electrical luxuries, and supplemental grain for energy. The horses eat with methodical thoroughness, and you can almost see the calories being converted to body heat. If we don't feed enough, horses lose weight, lose body heat, can freeze, Dmitri says. Is a balance, enough food to stay warm, but not so much they get fat and lazy. Fat horses are slow horses, and in spring and summer, we need them for work. The work horses do in Yakutia is varied. Pulling sleds, hauling firewood, transportation in areas where vehicles can't go, and in summer, helping with agriculture. They're not pets or recreational animals. They're working partners in survival, and the relationship between people and horses here is pragmatic but not unaffectionate. Dmitri clearly cares about these animals, speaking to them in a mixture of Saka and Russian, checking their legs for any signs of injury or cold damage, ensuring their shelter is properly maintained. See their hooves? He points to Kirikan's feet, and you notice they seem unusually hard and thick. Yakutian horse hooves are different, harder, less prone to cracking in cold. Regular horses brought here, their hooves crack, split, become painful. These horses, their hooves evolved for snow and ice. Everything about them is adapted. It's another example of the extraordinary specialization required for life here. Even the animals have to be specifically bred and adapted, or they simply don't survive. After tending the horses, Dmitri takes you outside to demonstrate reading frost patterns, another piece of traditional knowledge that saved lives. The frost on various surfaces, fence posts, building corners, tree branches, forms in patterns that indicate wind direction, temperature stability, and even upcoming weather changes. See how frost is thick and even on this post? Dmitri points, means temperature is stable, no wind. But here, on this corner, frost is thin and rippled, means wind from the east, possibly bringing weather change. Historians still argue whether traditional weather prediction methods based on frost patterns, animal behavior, and other environmental signs are as reliable as modern meteorology, but Dmitri swears by them. Weather forecast on phone says minus 58 tomorrow, he notes. But frost patterns say colder, maybe minus 65. I trust the frost. You ask why, and he grins. forecast comes from weather station maybe 50 kilometers away. Frost patterns are here now. Reading the actual conditions of this exact spot is more accurate for local prediction. He also shows you how to check for wind loading on structures. The way snow and frost accumulate can stress buildings and shelters, and excessive accumulation needs to be cleared before weight causes damage. The roof of the horse barn has a rake specifically designed for pulling snow off in thick, heavy slabs. 1 meter of snow weighs maybe 120 kilograms per square meter. Dmitry explains, roof covered in 2 meters of snow? That's thousands of kilograms. Even strong roof can collapse. So we clear regularly, check constantly. By midday, you're exhausted from the constant vigilance required. Every action needs to be considered. Is this safe? Is there a backup? What if this fails? You're beginning to understand that life in Yakutia isn't just about enduring cold. It's about maintaining dozens of interlocking systems. Heating, water, food, shelter, transportation, and constantly monitoring each one for failure. The morning ritual Mikhail performed wasn't unusual. It's the daily minimum required to maintain baseline survival. Over lunch, more soup, more meat, more tea, always more tea. Adalina talks about the psychological aspect of these rituals. Some people, they come here and they think we are paranoid, too careful, too worried. But this carefulness is why we survive. People who relax, who skip checks, who assume everything is fine, those people have emergencies. Those people freeze or starve or die. Our rituals, our checking, our redundancy, this is not anxiety. This is wisdom. She's absolutely right. What might look like obsessive behavior in a temperate climate is simple prudence here. The stakes are higher, the consequences more immediate, and the margin for error effectively zero. You can't afford to assume the pipes won't freeze, that the generator will start, that the ice is thick enough, that the horses have been fed enough. You check, you verify, you maintain, you prepare, and then you check again. As the afternoon fades back into darkness, because days here are more like brief interruptions in the night, you sit in the warm house and feel the weight of constant vigilance settling onto your shoulders. It's tiring in a way that physical labor isn't, this perpetual monitoring and risk assessment. But it's also, you're beginning to realize the price of living in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. You can't control the cold, can't negotiate with it or reason with it. You can only prepare, check, maintain, and respect it every single day without exception or rest. Outside, the wind picks up again, and you hear the familiar cracking and groaning of the house negotiating with the temperature. Inside, Mikhail checks the thermometer, notes the reading in his book, tests the water pressure at the kitchen sink, and nods with satisfaction. Another day, another successful negotiation with the cold. Tomorrow you'll do it all again. The roar of engines wakes you before dawn on your 6th day in Yakutia, and for a confused moment, you think you're near an airport. But then you remember vehicles, always running. The sound you're hearing is the neighbor's truck, the family's UAZ van, and probably a dozen other vehicles within earshot, all idling through the night because shutting them off means they might never start again. It's a constant mechanical heartbeat underlying life here, a reminder that in extreme cold, motion equals survival even for machines. After breakfast, Mikhail announces that you're going into Yakutsk proper, about 15 kilometers away, to pick up supplies. This will be your first real journey in a vehicle through the deep cold, and the preparation is elaborate. First, the van must be inspected, fluids checked, tires examined, emergency supplies verified. The emergency kit is substantial: extra blankets, a sleeping bag rated to -50°C, chemical hand warmers, high-calorie food bars, a full change of warm clothes, a shovel, a tow rope, flares, matches in a waterproof container, and a fully charged satellite phone. If the vehicle breaks down between here and Yakutsk, Mikhail explains with complete seriousness, and we cannot fix it quickly, we could be in trouble. Mobile phone coverage is not reliable in rural areas. Temperature is deadly, so we carry everything needed to survive until rescue arrives. He shows you the satellite phone, a bulky device that looks like it's from the early 2000s. This works anywhere, always. Expensive to use, but in emergency, cost doesn't matter. The van's interior is almost uncomfortably warm. Mikhail keeps the heater on maximum, and you're sweating within minutes of climbing in. Better too hot than too cold, he says. We can shed layers. If we get cold, if heater fails, we have big problems fast. The dashboard is a nest of warning lights and gauges that Mikhail monitors constantly. Engine temperature, oil pressure, battery voltage, fuel level. Every few minutes, his eyes flick across these indicators, checking for any sign of trouble. The drive itself is surreal. The road is hard-packed snow and ice, rutted from previous vehicles, and Mikhail drives with careful precision, never accelerating or braking sharply. Sudden movements on ice can mean losing control, he explains. And losing control in minus 62 degrees Celsius means you slide off road, crash, vehicle damaged, you stuck in cold. So we drive like grandmothers. Slow, careful, boring. The landscape outside is a monochrome study in white and gray, with occasional dark patches of exposed rock or the skeletal shapes of trees. The sun is making its brief appearance, hanging low and weak on the horizon, casting long shadows that stretch for kilometers. You pass another vehicle, a battered sedan that's also producing clouds of exhaust from continuous idling, and Mikhail raises a hand in greeting. The other driver responds in kind, and you realize this isn't just politeness. It's confirmation that both vehicles are operational. Both drivers are alive and well. In extreme environments, every human contact is a small miracle of mutual survival, an acknowledgement that you're both still fighting the same fight against the cold. Halfway to Yakutsk, you encounter something you didn't expect. Horses. A small herd of Yakutian horses, maybe 8 or 10 of them, standing in an open field beside the road, apparently unbothered by the temperature. They're not in a shelter, not near any visible hay or food, just standing in the snow, frost coating their shaggy bodies like white armor. Wild horses? You ask, incredulous. Mikhail chuckles. Semi-wild, owned by someone, but left to fend for themselves in winter. They dig through snow for dead grass, eat bark if needed, survive on almost nothing. In spring, owner will round them up, use them for work. But in winter, easier to let them survive on their own than to feed them. It seems cruel until you remember the economics of this place. Hay is precious, storage is limited, and feeding 10 horses through an 8-month winter is extraordinarily expensive in both labor and resources. The horses, meanwhile, are literally built for this. Their bodies adapted over centuries to extract nutrients from minimal food and generate enough heat to survive temperatures that would kill most equines. One horse lifts its head as you pass, frost falling from its mane in glittering crystals, then returns to pawing at the snow, searching for whatever vegetation might be buried beneath. The nostrils of these outdoor horses are the most striking thing. White with frost, ice crystals forming around the edges with each breath, creating a bizarre frosted effect that makes them look like mythical creatures from some frozen legend. The moisture in their breath freezes instantly, Mikhail explains, creates ice around nostrils. Too much ice and it can block breathing, which is dangerous. Horses must shake their heads, break off the ice, keep airways clear. Is another reason why sheltered horses are healthier. They don't have to deal with this problem. As you drive on, Mikhail talks about vehicle culture in Yakutia, which is unlike anywhere else. In Soviet times, all vehicles here were special Arctic models, modified from the factory for extreme cold. Thicker oil, better batteries, more insulation. But Soviet Union ended, and now we get regular vehicles that must be modified locally. Is expensive, requires knowledge, but is necessary. He points out various modifications on his own van, the previously noted block heater, but also auxiliary battery warmers, insulated fuel lines, a stronger alternator to handle the electrical load of constant heating elements, and even heated seats, not for comfort but as a backup source of warmth if the main heater fails. Fuel economy in extreme cold is abysmal, he explains. The engine takes longer to reach operating temperature, idling wastes fuel, and the thickened oil creates more resistance, making the engine work harder. In summer, maybe this van gets 12 kilometers per liter of fuel, Mikhail says. In winter, maybe 6 or 7 kilometers per liter, sometimes worse. Everything is expensive here, fuel, food, heating, all of it. But expensive is better than dead, so we pay. You enter Yakutsk, and the city is a study in adaptation. Every building sits on stilts, Power lines are wrapped in insulation and heat traced. Vehicles line the streets, most of them running, creating a haze of exhaust that hangs in the still, cold air. People move between buildings quickly, purposefully, minimizing exposure time. Playgrounds sit empty. Even the hardy Yakutian children won't play outside when it's this cold. The city has a provisional, temporary feeling, as if it's constantly on the verge of packing up and moving somewhere more sensible. Mikhail parks in a covered garage attached to a shopping complex, a luxury that means he can turn the van off without worrying about it starting again. Covered parking with electrical hookups, he explains. I plug in the block heater, and when we're ready to leave, van will start. Costs money to park here, but saves fuel from idling, so actually cheaper. Inside the complex, the temperature is almost tropical, and you immediately start shedding layers, stuffing mittens and scarves into pockets. The shopping experience is fascinating. Stores sell items you'd never see elsewhere. Specialized cold weather gear, massive quantities of heating fuel in various forms, survival equipment as standard household items. There's an entire section devoted to block heaters, battery warmers, and vehicle modification parts. Another section sells emergency shelters, mylar blankets, and chemical heat packs in bulk. A pharmacy offers specialized skin creams for frostbite prevention and treatment, vitamin D supplements, because winter here means months without meaningful sunlight, and what appears to be an entire wall of lip balm because the extreme dry cold cracks lips within minutes. Mikhail's shopping list is practical and substantial. More wood for the stove, delivered to the house later. Kerosene for backup heating, groceries heavy on preserved and frozen items, batteries in every size, cold drains batteries fast, so you go through them constantly. And a new scarf for Dmitri, whose current one is so crusted with frozen breath that it's more ice than fabric. You watch other shoppers moving through the space with practiced efficiency, everyone knowing exactly what they need, minimizing time in public spaces because even indoors, the risk of spreading illness in the dry, cold air is high. At a cafe inside the complex, you stop for hot food and more tea, always tea, and Mikhail talks about the evolution of Yakutsk. When I was young, much of city was smaller, fewer modern buildings. But diamond money, gold money, gas money, these brought development. Now we have apartment blocks, modern stores, even some luxury. But basic problems remain. Cold, permafrost, isolation. No amount of money changes these things, only makes dealing with them a little easier. The cafe window offers a view of the street, and you watch as a city bus approaches, belching black exhaust. Buses here must be specially modified too, Mikhail notes, and they run constantly on the coldest days, circling routes without stopping, because stopping means freezing. Drivers work in shifts, but bus never stops moving. It's another example of the motion equals survival principle that governs so much here. A child walks past outside, bundled beyond recognition, only eyes visible between fur hat and wrapped scarf, and you're struck by the resilience this environment demands. That child is probably 6 or 7 years old and has never known a life where stepping outside doesn't require elaborate preparation, where metal isn't dangerous, where you can breathe deeply without pain. What does it do to a person's psychology, you wonder, to grow up in a place this hostile? Does it make them tougher, more appreciative of warmth and comfort? Or does it create a baseline anxiety, a constant awareness of danger? Mikhail must see something in your expression because he says, "You're wondering if we're crazy to live here." You start to protest, but he waves it off. Is a reasonable question, but this is our home. Our ancestors adapted, we adapted, our children adapt. Yes is hard. Yes is dangerous, but is also beautiful, clean, and there's a clarity here. Life is simple. Stay warm, stay fed, stay alive. In other places, people worry about many things: social status, career, what others think. Here, we worry about survival. Is honest, is pure. Maybe we are crazy, but if so, is a good kind of crazy. The drive home is uneventful, the van starting immediately thanks to the block heater, and you make it back as the brief day is ending and darkness returning. Unloading the supplies, you notice how quickly frost forms on the packages brought from inside. The temperature differential is so extreme that condensation freezes almost instantly, coating everything in white crystals. Dmitri helps carry wood to the stack, and the neighbor's truck continues its endless idling. The exhaust plume a constant reminder that in Yakutia, rest is a luxury only living things can afford. Machines must keep moving, keep running, keep fighting the cold, or they surrender and become frozen monuments to the hubris of thinking metal and combustion can defeat the deepest cold on Earth. On your 8th night in Yakutia, you lie in bed unable to sleep despite the warm furs and the exhaustion in your bones, and you realize something has shifted. It's not a physical change, though your body is definitely adapting, fingers healing, breathing easier, but a psychological one. The constant darkness is beginning to weigh on you, a pressure you can't quite name. It's not just the absence of light. It's the way darkness becomes the default state of existence, with brief intervals of weak daylight that feel more like interruptions than relief. You mention this at breakfast, trying to articulate the strange heaviness you're feeling, and the family exchanges knowing looks. Ah, Adelina says with gentle understanding. The darkness is finding you. This happens to everyone, even those born here. In Saka, we call it Kiriak, the winter weight. Your language might call it seasonal depression, but that sounds too clinical. Is more than depression. Is the darkness pressing on your soul? Mikhail nods. Happens around this time for most people. First few days, everything is novel, interesting. Then the cold and dark become constant, and your mind begins to feel it. Some people, it's mild, just tiredness, wanting to sleep more. Other people, it's heavy, real depression, dark thoughts, difficulty finding joy. Humans are not meant for this much darkness. Our brains need light like our bodies need food. The science supports what they're saying. Seasonal affective disorder, SAD, is significantly more prevalent in high-latitude populations, including in Yakutia and other subarctic regions. The lack of sunlight disrupts circadian rhythms, reduces serotonin production, and throws off melatonin regulation. Vitamin D deficiency, caused by lack of UVB exposure, contributes to mood disorders and immune dysfunction. Some studies have found depression rates 3 to 4 times higher in polar regions during winter months compared to temperate zones, and even accounting for cultural adaptation, the psychological toll is real and measurable. What do you do about it? You ask, genuinely curious how people maintain mental health through months of near-total darkness. Jürgen, who's been quiet until now, speaks up. Light therapy lamps. We all use them. She points to a device on the counter that looks like a flat LED panel. Sit in front of it for 30 minutes each morning. Tricks your brain into thinking it's seen sunlight. Helps with mood. Helps with sleep rhythm. She demonstrates, positioning the lamp on the table and sitting before it. Her face bathed in bright, blue-white light that mimics natural daylight. But lamps only help so much, Adelina adds. We also have community, routine, purpose. These things matter more than any lamp. She explains that during the darkest months, community gatherings become more frequent and more important. People visit each other more often, share meals, play games, tell stories. The social connection becomes a lifeline, a reminder that you're not alone in the darkness, that others are fighting the same fight. Dmitri mentions the importance of maintaining a strict daily routine. Same wake time, same sleep time, same meals at same time each day. This helps brain know what time it is, even when sky gives no information. Without routine, time becomes liquid, confusing. I've seen people lose track of days, sleep at wrong times, eat at wrong times, and this makes the darkness worse. Structure, in the absence of natural light cues, becomes a psychological anchor. Mikhail talks about the necessity of purpose and meaningful work. Winter is long, and if you have nothing to do, nothing to accomplish, the darkness eats you. But if you have animals to tend, family to care for, projects to complete, then each day has meaning. You get up because the horses need feeding, because the wood needs stacking, because your child needs breakfast. Purpose keeps the darkness from consuming you. It's a deeply pragmatic form of existentialism. You find meaning or you suffer, so you find meaning. Historians still argue whether indigenous populations in polar regions have genetic or cultural adaptations that make them more resilient to the psychological effects of polar night, but the evidence is mixed. Some studies suggest that after generations of exposure, Certain populations show different patterns of melatonin production or circadian regulation, but the effects are subtle. What's clearer is that cultural practices, social cohesion, meaningful rituals, physical activity, dietary patterns, play enormous roles in maintaining mental health during the dark months. Adelina tells you about a neighbor who struggled badly 2 years ago, became withdrawn, stopped eating properly, stopped caring for herself. We noticed because we didn't see smoke from her chimney one morning, Adelina says. Went to check on her, found her in bed, just lying there, not caring whether she froze or lived. We brought her here, fed her, sat with her, made her talk. After a few days, she was better. After a few weeks, she was herself again. But she needed community, needed people to notice and care. Living alone in winter darkness here can be deadly in more ways than just the cold. The isolation aspect is particularly challenging for people who aren't native to the region. Yakutsk, despite being a city of nearly 300,000 people, is incredibly isolated geographically. The nearest major city is thousands of kilometers away. In winter, roads become unreliable, and air travel is expensive and weather-dependent. If you're struggling psychologically and want to leave, to escape to somewhere with more light and warmth, that escape is neither easy nor quick. You're trapped, in a sense, by geography and climate, forced to endure until spring arrives. Njurgen, with the perspective of someone who's grown up here, but also connected to the wider world via the internet, offers her view. I think the darkness is hardest for people who fight it, who see it as an enemy. But if you accept it, even find beauty in it, it's easier. The stars here in winter are incredible. No light pollution, clear air, endless darkness making them brilliant. The aurora borealis in deep winter is like nothing else on Earth. If you only see darkness as absence of light, you suffer. If you see it as its own kind of beautiful, as time for rest and reflection, it's easier. She's touching on something that some psychologists call reframing, changing the narrative you tell yourself about an experience. The darkness isn't an enemy or a punishment. It's a season, a natural cycle, something to be experienced rather than merely endured. This doesn't eliminate the biochemical effects of light deprivation, but it can modify the psychological response, turning what might be abject suffering into something more like dignified endurance with moments of wonder. Later that day, Dmitri takes you outside during the few hours of twilight, and he shows you what Njurgen was talking about. The sky is a deep, profound blue-black, and the stars are so numerous and bright they look unreal, like someone has punctured the fabric of space and light is bleeding through. The Milky Way stretches overhead in impossible detail, and you can see colors in it, blues and pinks and purples, that are normally invisible in lighter skies. This, Dmitri says quietly, you cannot see this in your cities with all your lights. The darkness gives us this gift. Maybe the trade is worth it. You stand there, neck craned back, breathing carefully through your scarf, and you feel something shift. The darkness is still heavy, still oppressive, but it's also the canvas on which this extraordinary beauty is displayed. Without the darkness, no stars. Without the cold, no frost crystals catching the starlight on every surface, creating a glittering landscape that seems to glow from within. It's a small reframing, but it helps. Back inside, Adelina has prepared a special meal. She won't say what the occasion is, but there's a celebratory feel to it. The table is loaded with special dishes. Boiled horse meat with onions, stroganina, the blood pudding you've come to tolerate if not love, fresh bread, and a surprise, cloudberry jam, preserved from the brief summer and doled out sparingly. After the meal, Mikhail brings out a stringed instrument you don't recognize, a long-necked thing with a haunting sound, and plays traditional Saka melodies that are both melancholic and somehow uplifting. The music fills the warm room, and Njurgen explains that music and storytelling are crucial during the dark months. Before electricity, before recorded entertainment, people would gather and share stories, play music, keep each other's spirits up through the whole winter. It was survival strategy, not just entertainment. She tells a traditional Saka tale about a hero who journeyed to the underworld, a realm of eternal cold and darkness, and brought back fire and light for his people. The parallels to the current reality aren't subtle, and you understand that these stories served a purpose. They gave meaning to the suffering, turned it into a hero's journey that everyone was undertaking together. As the evening progresses, neighbors begin arriving. Apparently this gathering was planned, though no one mentioned it to you. Soon the small house is full of people, maybe 15 in total, from young children to elderly grandparents. Food continues to appear. Everyone brings something, and the volume rises as conversations overlap. Laughter erupts. Children play. It's warm, crowded, almost overwhelming. But you realize this is the antidote to the darkness Adelina was talking about. This is how you survive. Together, in warmth and noise and connection, reminding each other that you're alive, that there's joy to be found even in the depths of winter. An elderly woman, introduced as Claudia, a friend of Adelina's late mother, corners you and asks through Adelina's translation how you're finding Yakutia. You try to articulate your experience, the shock of the cold, the strange beauty, the crushing darkness. She listens carefully, then says something in Saka that Adelina translates. The darkness teaches you to appreciate light. The cold teaches you to appreciate warmth. Suffering teaches you to appreciate joy. This is why people from here are strong. Not because we don't feel cold or darkness or pain, but because we know what these things are worth once they pass. It's profound in its simplicity, and you think about your life in warmer, easier places, where warmth and light are constant and therefore invisible, taken for granted. Here, nothing is taken for granted. Every warm room is a victory. Every meal is a celebration. Every human connection is a small miracle of mutual survival. The darkness and cold don't crush the human spirit. They refine it, sharpen it, make it aware of precisely how precious and fragile life is. As the gathering winds down and people begin bundling up for the journey home, some live only a few houses away, but still, preparation is necessary. You feel something you haven't felt since arriving: contentment. Not happiness exactly, but a deep, grounded sense of being in the right place, of being part of something larger than yourself. The darkness is still there, will still be there tomorrow and for months to come. But you're not facing it alone, and that makes all the difference. You help clean up, wash dishes in hot water that feels luxurious on your hands, and listen to Mikhail and Adelina talk quietly about spring. Planning the summer garden, discussing which animals might be bred, dreaming about the first warm days when you can go outside without armor. Spring is still 3 months away, an unimaginable distance, but talking about it makes it real, makes it something to move toward. That night, you sleep deeply, and in your dreams, you're not cold. In your dreams, there's light. Not the weak twilight of Yakutian winter, but warm, golden sunlight streaming through windows, touching your face. And when you wake to darkness and the sound of the cold cracking the house's bones, you don't feel the same dread. You feel something closer to acceptance. The darkness is here. You are here. And together with these people who have made an art form of survival, you'll endure until the light returns. By your 12th day in Yakutia, something remarkable happens. The temperature rises. You check the thermometer with Mikhail during his morning ritual and see -38 degrees Celsius. And your first thought is that something must be broken. But Mikhail grins broadly and announces, "Heat wave! Today is practically summer." He's not entirely joking. After nearly 2 weeks of temperatures consistently below -55 degrees Celsius, -38 degrees Celsius feels genuinely mild, almost balmy, and you catch yourself thinking you could probably go outside without quite so many layers. This is a dangerous thought, and Adelina immediately corrects you when you voice it. -38 is still cold enough to kill you in minutes if you're unprepared, she warns. But yes, your body is adapting. What felt impossible 2 weeks ago now feels normal. What felt deadly now feels merely uncomfortable. This is acclimatization working. She's right, you can feel the difference. Your fingers don't go numb quite as quickly. Your breathing is easier. The initial shock of stepping outside, while still unpleasant, doesn't trigger the same panic response it did when you first arrived. Over breakfast, Dmitri excitedly explains that the warm weather means they can do outdoor work that's been postponed. Repairs to the animal shelters, cutting and hauling firewood, checking on the more distant sections of their property. Cold below -50 makes some work nearly impossible, he says. Metal tools become brittle and can shatter. Wood becomes so hard it's difficult to cut. Your body slows down, can't work as efficiently. But at -38, this is good working weather. The fact that nearly 40 degrees below zero qualifies as good working weather would sound insane anywhere else. But here, context is everything. The change in temperature has other effects you didn't anticipate. The house sounds different. Fewer cracking and groaning noises as materials aren't contracting quite as severely. The air outside feels different too, slightly less aggressive, less like it's actively trying to kill you. And perhaps most noticeably, you see more people outside. A couple of children are actually playing in the snow near a neighbor's house, building something that might be a snow fort, their laughter carrying through the clear air. Mikhail explains that temperature swings like this are normal in Yakutian winters. We might have 1 week at -65, then 2 days at -35, then back to -55, he says. The variation is hard on structures, hard on vehicles, but easier on people psychologically. These warm breaks remind you that winter will not last forever, that temperature can change. Some researchers studying polar psychology have found that variability in conditions, even if the variation is just between extremely hostile and somewhat less extremely hostile, helps with mental resilience. The human brain needs change, needs evidence that conditions are not static. You join Dmitry outside for woodcutting duty, and the difference in temperature is remarkable. You can work for nearly an hour before needing a warm-up break, compared to the 15 or 20 minutes that was your limit before. The chainsaw, a specialized model with modifications for cold weather, starts more easily at -38 degrees Celsius than it did at -60 degrees Celsius. Your movements feel less restricted, your clothing less suffocating. It's still cold, still dangerous, but the edge of lethality has dulled slightly. While cutting wood, Dmitry points to the southern horizon where the sun is making a noticeably longer appearance. Days are getting longer, he notes. Maybe 5-6 minutes more daylight than 2 weeks ago. You probably don't notice, but we do. By March, we'll have maybe 8 hours of daylight. By April, 12 hours. By May, the sun barely sets. The idea of the sun barely setting seems as alien as the current darkness, but Dmitry's face lights up talking about it. Summer solstice here, sun is visible for maybe 20 hours. Never gets fully dark. We call it the white nights, and it's... He pauses, searching for words. It's like being drunk on light. You don't want to sleep because there's always sun, always light. Feels wasteful to sleep. This is the flip side of polar night, polar day. While winter brings crushing darkness, summer brings almost overwhelming light, and both extremes come with psychological challenges. Some research suggests that the hyperactivity and sleeplessness that often accompany the white nights can lead to a different kind of disorder. Mania-like symptoms, poor decision-making, exhaustion from not sleeping enough. Humans, it seems, need both light and dark, and too much of either throws the system out of balance. As you work, you notice the snow quality changing. At extremely cold temperatures, snow is dry and crystalline, almost like powder. But at -38 degrees Celsius, it's slightly sticky, better for packing. The children you saw earlier are taking advantage of this, and you watch as they successfully create snowballs and lob them at each other, something that would be impossible in colder temperatures. Snow science, Dmitry says with a smile. Too cold, snow won't stick together. Too warm, snow melts and becomes wet. Perfect snowball temperature is maybe -10 to -20, but even -38 is workable if you're determined. By midday, the temperature has climbed to an almost shocking -32 degrees Celsius, and Mikhail makes a decision that seems both crazy and perfectly logical. They're going to wash some clothes. Proper washing, he explains, is difficult in extreme cold because water freezes too quickly. But at -32 degrees Celsius, with careful timing, they can wash items, hang them outside, and let them freeze dry, the moisture sublimating directly from ice to vapor without passing through a liquid phase. It's faster than indoor drying and has the advantage of sterilizing the fabric through the freeze process. You watch, fascinated, as Adalina works through a load of laundry with almost military precision. Items are washed in hot water inside, wrung out as thoroughly as possible, then rushed outside where they're hung on lines. Within minutes, they're frozen solid, stiff as boards. Leave them for several hours, Adelina explains. The ice will sublimate away, and clothes will be dry and fresh. In deep cold below -50, process is too slow, clothes might not dry for days. But at this temperature, works perfectly. It's another example of using the environment as a tool rather than fighting against it. The cold becomes an ally in household chores rather than an obstacle. The afternoon brings another surprise. You see your first hint of color in the sky. During the brief period when the sun is highest, there's a band of pale pink along the southern horizon, a reminder that the sun still exists somewhere beyond the edge of the world. It's brief, maybe 15 minutes of faint color, but after weeks of monochrome grays and blacks and whites, it's startling and beautiful. Njurgen photographs it on her phone, and you understand that even for people who've lived here their entire lives, these small moments of change and beauty matter deeply. As evening approaches and the temperature predictably begins dropping again, it'll probably be back below -45 degrees Celsius by midnight. The family gathers for dinner, and there's a celebratory mood. The warmer day allowed them to accomplish tasks that had been pending, to move around more freely, to feel slightly less besieged by the environment. It's a small victory, but victories here are measured in degrees Celsius and minutes of daylight, and small is all you get. Over dinner, you ask about spring, about what it's actually like when winter finally breaks. Mikhail's face becomes thoughtful. Spring here is violent, he says. Not gentle like in temperate places. The ice doesn't melt slowly, it breaks. Rivers that have been frozen for 8 months suddenly crack and surge. Flooding is common. The permafrost surface melts, and everything becomes mud. Thick, deep mud that swallows vehicles and makes travel nearly impossible. We call it Rasputitsa, the time of bad roads. For maybe 4-5 weeks, Yakutia is almost inaccessible by land. Adelina adds, but before the mud, there's a moment, usually in late April or early May, when temperature first stays above zero. That first day when you wake up and it's +2, +3 degrees, and you can go outside without full Arctic gear, can breathe deeply without pain, can see grass starting to show through melting snow. That's the most beautiful day of the year. Better than any summer day because you've earned it. You've survived the winter, and spring is your reward. Dmitri talks about the explosion of life that happens when warmth returns. Birds arrive in massive flocks. Geese, cranes, countless species migrating north to breed. Flowers bloom almost overnight because growing season is so short they can't waste time. The horses and cattle go outside to pasture, and you can see how happy they are, rolling in the grass, running. Everything that was dormant or hiding or barely surviving suddenly comes alive. It sounds like a resurrection, a mass return from death, and you understand that the cycle of seasons here is more extreme than almost anywhere else on Earth. Historians still argue whether the extreme seasonal variation in Yakutia has shaped the culture in specific ways, whether the months of darkness and cold followed by brief, intense summers have created a particular worldview or set of values. Some suggest it encourages both fatalism and intense appreciation for transient beauty. Others argue that it creates a pragmatic, present-focused mindset where long-term planning is difficult because conditions are so variable. The evidence is mixed, but what's clear is that people here live with an acute awareness of impermanence and change. As the evening progresses and you settle into the familiar comfort of the warm house, you notice changes in yourself. The constant background anxiety you felt during your first days has diminished. You're no longer hyper-aware of every gust of wind or drop in temperature. The rituals of survival, checking thermometers, testing water, monitoring the stove, have become routine rather than sources of stress. You're adapting, both physiologically and psychologically, becoming if not Yakutian then, at least more capable of understanding what it means to live here. That night, as you prepare for sleep, you step outside briefly for one last look at the stars. The temperature has indeed dropped back to -44 degrees Celsius, but it feels almost mild compared to the 60s you've grown accustomed to. The stars are brilliant. The aurora borealis is dancing in pale green curtains across the northern sky, and the frost on every surface glitters in the starlight like the world is covered in diamonds. You stand there, breathing carefully, feeling the cold but not fearing it quite the way you did before. You've learned its rules, learned to read its signs, learned to respect it without being paralyzed by it. The cold is still dangerous, still deadly if you make mistakes, but it's no longer an incomprehensible enemy. It's an adversary you're learning to negotiate with, day by day, breath by breath. Inside, warmth waits. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and small victories. But tonight, standing under the dancing lights in air cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes, you feel something unexpected: gratitude. Gratitude for the warmth that makes the cold bearable, for the light that makes the darkness beautiful, for the people who've shown you how to survive in a place that seems determined to kill you. Yakutia hasn't broken you. Instead, it's teaching you exactly how strong a human being can be when strength is the only option. You take one more deep breath of the crystalline air, then turn and walk back to the house, to warmth and family and the endless cups of tea that fuel life in the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. Spring is still months away, but it's coming. And when it arrives, you'll understand in your bones what it means to survive, to endure, to hold on to life and warmth and hope through the longest, darkest, coldest night. And now, as our journey through Yakutia comes to its close, let the images soften around the edges. The cold recedes just a little. The darkness becomes less heavy. You're warm now, wrapped in blankets, in a place where the temperature is kind and the light is gentle. The people of Yakutia continue their dance with winter, checking thermometers and feeding fires and holding snow in their mouths when nosebleeds come. But you can rest now. Let the sound of the wind fade into the hum of your fan or the quiet of your room. Let the frost patterns on the window dissolve into the soft darkness behind your eyelids. The lessons of survival, the backup plans, the constant vigilance, the small rituals that keep death at bay, these remain but as thoughts rather than imperatives. You're safe. You're warm. You've traveled to the edge of human endurance and returned. The stars over Yakutia will continue their brilliant display whether you watch or not. The horses will paw through snow for frozen grass. The houses will crack and groan in the cold. Life will persist in the most hostile inhabited place on Earth, stubborn and beautiful and fierce. But you've learned what you came to learn: that humans can adapt to almost anything, that community and knowledge and ritual can make the impossible merely difficult, and that sometimes the harshest environments teach the gentlest lessons about what really matters. Sleep now. Dream of spring if you like, or of summer's endless light, or simply of warmth. The journey is complete. Tomorrow, when you wake, you'll be wherever you are, in whatever climate cradles you. But you'll carry with you the knowledge of what humans can endure, what we can survive, how tough and tender and brilliantly adaptable we are when the world demands everything we have. Rest easy. The cold can't reach you here. You're safe, you're warm, and the longest winter always gives way to spring.